workshop involved in the committee structures. We got John as he has a leave of absence, or is he actually?
He was intending on joining.
He was joining for a wee bit on the airport, I think.
But I haven't had him come.
We'll just leave him there at the moment. He turns up. You know where he is anyway, so it's really notice. So today we're obviously going through the council committee structures, which it's a pretty open discussion. A few of us that have been here will give us their inputs into what works and maybe something that doesn't work. Open to basically any ideas. We've obviously got a bit of information around other councils, is that right?
Yep.
So it's a pretty open discussion and work around it. Today we're not necessarily stressing about who's going to be chair and deputy chairs, but may at the end have interest in the committees. If that's feasible for everyone. But it's a pretty open discussion anyways. And Amy's going to lead us through this at this stage. If there's any questions, we'll just get into it. Like I say, it'll be pretty open anyway. We'll see what works and what doesn't and go from there. All good?
Thank you.
No questions?
I'm probably blind, but regional service was another one.
Yes.
It
should be there.
Should be big.
I can't wait. I'm blind.
Regional service was on page 63. Oh, way back, way at the back.
Yep.
I was just looking at the opening paper here with all
I think
the.
the terms are interesting. So are on the back attachment. So okay, we'll be there. Right, Amy, with you. Carry on.
Presentation. All right, so thank you, kia ora koutou, everybody. So the purpose of today's workshop is just to share with you some information to help you determine what committee structure you might like for this term, or certainly for the start of the term, recognising that whatever you choose today isn't fixed for the duration of the term. As part of your workshop materials, we provided an LGNZ guide. There's some really, really good guidance in there to help you think about the effectiveness and the type and the nature of your decision-making structures. And what we want to do today is to get your feedback. So the next council meeting, which is next week, we can share a paper with you so that you can make that initial decision on your structures. So no decision making today, just input so that we can put a formal paper up to you for decision making in the right channels. So this, whatever committee structure you decide on next week, will also form the basis of a paper which will come to you for your last meeting of the year on the 10th of December, and that is to agree what the meeting schedule will be, and we're required to do that under legislation. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to briefly recap before we get into it some of the key points that were traversed in the LGNZ document. So pretty much everything that we do in local government requires a decision. And those decisions that you're making here around this council table not only affect the thousands of people that live, reside and travel to the region, but also have a significant and enduring impact into the future as well. And that decision making is not only influenced by the information and the processes that you use to make those decisions, but also the structures that are used to make those decisions. And the game in town is really about, well, how do you make a good decision?
Oh, sorry, it's kicked me out.
Oh.
What's it kicked me? And that won't let me back into the microscope.
And if anybody's been sending me text messages in the last 2 days, my tractor decided to run over my phone on Saturday, so lost all my contacts generally in my life at the moment. So
You can get the back.
not if you don't back me.
If you've got a Gmail address,
Yeah.
you can get it back.
And we're covering all the bases, but some of the bases aren't covered. Let's just say that. Means you can't not. You've got to answer every phone call, unfortunately. So,
User error.
Hey?
User error.
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Those sentient tractors, they're terrible, aren't they?
What 13 tons up to a phone anyway. Still going internally.
While you're doing that, I might just keep going.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
okay. So, good decision making. What characterises good decision making? Well, it enables you as a governing body to focus on the strategic matters that really matter most, rather than getting caught up in urgent or trivial issues. It enhances democracy because it provides a platform for not only your representation for your particular wards and areas that you represent, but it also provides the opportunity for the public and citizens to participate. It's transparent to the public how the decisions are being made, what information they're being based on, and the conversations that support them. And it has clear lines of accountability, whether that's from the staff to the governing body, or the committees that are traversing the matters through to the decision-making body. It makes that really, really clear. So what are the legislative foundations of good decision-making? The first clause of the local government purpose in the LGA is really about allowing for or enabling democratic decision-making on and behalf of the communities, right? So given that we operate, it's a primary piece of legislation for us, we need to make sure that whatever decision-making structures we have reflect that key part of our purpose. And then section 14 of the Local Government Act, just foundations, which is about slide 4, page 4.
Me sharing and Amy.
Oh, right, sorry. So there's some principles of local government in section 14, which primarily account for us being able to undertake our business in an open, transparent and accountable manner, and give effect to agreed priorities and outcomes, and to do that in an efficient and effective way. It reinforces the need for council to be aware of the views of all of its communities. And it also requires for councils to provide opportunities for Māori to contribute to decision-making processes. And then the section 39 governance principles also reinforce the above approach and talks to the separation of regulatory and non-regulatory decisions. And the reason that it speaks to that is to uphold the integrity of those decisions, particularly in relation to council's regulatory role, because this affects the rights and interests of particular bodies or interests of individuals and businesses, and it also aims to prevent any real or perceived conflicts of interest, and thereby maintaining public confidence in the work and the decisions that council are making. Next page. So there are a variety of decision-making models, and they exist on a continuum of centralisation. At one end, you have council, which as the governing body makes all the decisions and does all the mahi. And then at the far end of the scale, you delegate all those decisions to self-identified communities. So you delegate all your power, and then there's everything in between. So historically, in Environment Southland, the governing body, which is council, which is everybody here around the table, has retained the decision-making authority, but it has delegated some of the mahi to inform those decisions through to its committees. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that particular committee making structure. So in the LGNZ document, and for those of you who read it or want to have a quick look, on page 11 and 12 of the actual thing, which will not be 11 and 12 of your hard copy. It is page 14 and 15 of your agenda, your workshop agenda. What the LGNZ did was they looked at the LGA purpose and principles and came up with 9 criteria that they propose that council should consider when they're determining what their decision-making structure should be. So just, I've popped those up there. I'm not going to speak into all of them, but just to draw out a few. You know, number 2 there, access to internal expertise. Sometimes it's helpful to have independent members appointed to bodies. And certainly in last training structure, within our investment committee, we had a couple of independent appointments there, and our risk and assurance committee had an independent appointee as chair, which is reflective of the Office of the Auditor General's guidance and recommendations in that. In terms of point 3, we had last training mana whenua representation on 2 of our committees, our Strategy and Policy Committee and our Regional Services Committee. Point number 4 there, and we were talking about that before, you know, one of your roles around the table is to scrutinise the performance of the organisation in relation to its outcomes, its business plan, its commitments, the work and the work programs of the various committees. Whatever decision-making model that you choose needs to allow for sufficient time, effort and energy to be devoted to that. Making sure that you've got, you know, the right skills around the table to enable effective questioning, and also allowing the time and space for that questioning as well. Number 6, this openness to citizen participation requires a model that, again, strikes that right balance between formality and allowing enough time for representations from the community to come and talk to councils or bodies of council, and enable that to be, again, like I said, within the formal construct, but not so formal that it cannot allow for people to be able to make representations and have sufficient questioning and engagement from councillors in relation to that. Point 7 there talks not to just your own individual development and upskilling through training, but also by practice, for example, through chairing or co-chairing or deputy chairing of committees or subcommittees or other bodies that might be set up by council. And point number 8 there also speaks to a structure that enables sufficient and appropriate engagement on the strategic matters rather than dealing with some of the smaller, urgent or reactive matters. So creating the right sort of space for both of those. Next slide, please.
Question.
Yes, sorry.
Right, yeah, number 3 there, iwi representation. Do we need to formalise that again for this year? We sent a letter, or what actually happens to us fulfilling what our best way of going forward that is?
It's made a decision has already made a decision last time to have mana whenua representatives on a couple of specific committees. So unless the committees were changing, that's a standing invite, so it's a standing decision by council. If council wishes to change that decision, then that would have to be
Okay.
a separate.
So that's an in perpetuity thing. My question then, following up from that, was, have we had a discussion with them to say, is this fulfilling your expectations? Is there some other way we can do that? I'm just sort of conscious of the fact that we need to be as embracing as we can.
Yes. So there have been conversations that have been happening in the background as I understand them, and I guess in terms of the process and the moving forwards from here, it's up to us to determine, or council to determine, what its committee making
Right.
structure is, and then to engage in that conversation more fully. Rachel, is there anything you would add to that?
Just to note that yes, there have been conversations being held within the Tamarama, and they're waiting for obviously the council to land on its committee structure, but have been working internally to see where they'll put forward. So we're just waiting for the process to flow through before we can get them to advise us on that.
So just to clarify, the expectations, the 2 and 2, like we had in the boxes, that's what they're sort of preparing for. Lyndall?
Yeah, also need to be mindful that who they appoint is entirely up to them. It's got nothing to do with us.
But if there was any change or anything in committee structures, so we need to keep them informed. Not that I think there is, I'm just saying if there was, but obviously the S&P and regional services, yeah. No. So everybody understands that. New council. Any other questions in regards to that or clarification?
So next slide. I'm not sure who's driving. Paula driving still, right? So the first, I guess, consideration that you need to make is whether you want to govern alone or whether you want to govern with committees. So if you're governing alone, everything comes to council. There's no committees where you can discuss things in depth. And as much as you're governing alone, it does typically require some other committees as well. And a couple that are recommended as standalone committees are your Audit and Risk Committee and your Chief Executive Employment Committee, and the joint committees, which we've talked about, which was already established. And sometimes in this type of arrangement, where you're just governing as a council, there might be from time to time where you need to set up committees to deal with on-demand type work, or you're working on specific topics that have cropped up for a defined period of time. In the governing with committees environment or approach, you tend to be meeting more of those principles, those 9 principles that the LGNZ had determined than you are when you're governing alone. Helps to manage workloads around the table, enables more efficient and effective use of time, not just for yourselves around the table, staff as well, and allows for more scrutiny because you can take more time to really drill in and dig into some of the issues. But it requires a bit more coordination and admin internally than just having a singular body which you're dealing with for everything.
Discuss these as we go through.
Yes.
I'm just talking about governing alone. Anybody got any questions?
No. We'll go to that. I'm just recapping and then not asking for guidance at this point.
Okay.
Yep. But there's some questions.
You want some questions as we go?
Yep.
Chair.
Mr. Chair. Look, Amy, you mentioned about the CE appointment committee.
Yep.
Is that 3 or 4 of the committee? But when we appoint a CE, that would the final 2 or 3 candidates would go to the full council meeting.
Really?
Yeah. So one of the things that you can't delegate as a council to a committee is the appointment of a chief executive. So, and then again, that you get into the, well, actually, does everybody want to be involved in everything around the table in relation to that particular matter? or do you delegate some aspects of that to a body and then have it come back here? That's a conversation for this group. And yeah, we'll bring that specific conversation in relation to this specific council to you at a separate time, because, you know, that's going to be one of the very early jobs that you have. Yeah, is to recruit a permanent council, but I won't go into that specifically.
So I just wanted.
But yeah.
There was some energy in the last council that everybody's involved in the selection all the way through.
I think that usually there might be all the chairs of the committees going, not dealing with the last three, getting down to that last three, if that was acceptable to the council. And then in the last, once we've got 2 or 3 people, that's when the council can get into it. I think that's how we did last time.
Thank you.
It'll be fine to sort that out though.
This is not now.
No,
Yeah,
it's not now, but it's.
Because we've got some new people here, I think it's pertinent to say that the committees don't have authority to make any decisions. They are subservient to the wider council, and they make a report with a recommendation which is further discussed at council. So they're the energy room that actually does a lot of the work, and I would like to think how often the council would have to meet if we didn't have committees doing that structural work.
But,
But they are a subservient body to the council.
well, they have been
Currently.
in the previous triennium, but it is possible for council to delegate some of its decision-making authorities to its committees. If it does that on a no prisoners basis, because if it delegates the responsibility to the committee and the committee makes a decision, that effectively is the decision of council. Yeah. So that's, you know, if that's what rolls for you guys, fine. It's not the way we've operated in the past. It is a possibility. And council can't then go and override that decision, but it can rescind or revoke the delegation from the committee going forwards if it so wishes.
Right.
Yeah, cool. So designing for committees, how you should be thinking about this. So this picks up, and I've pulled it out as a separate, there were 2 separate pieces of information on page 55 and 56 of your agendas. One's in a table, page 55, page 56 is the flow chart about how you should be thinking about this. So you can establish committees and subcommittees. They can be established under Section 7, Clause 30 of the Local Government Act, and that's by agreement of the majority of council. So there's a variety of ways in which you can shape your committee structure, and you know, we talked about those in the various centralised to decentralised models there, and then on page 57 you'll see that we've got a table here that lists the different ways some regional councils, including our own, have structured their committees. And you can see that there's an enormous amount of variability in how different councils choose to do this. So this is all up for discussion. Next. We talked briefly about delegations before. So as Eric said previously, the generic role of committee is to consider, you know, particular matters and to give advice back to council based on their information seeking and scrutiny roles. And as I touched on before, there are some decisions that you cannot delegate to your committees. But actually, when you have a look at that list, there is an enormous range of decisions that you can. And that list is on page 29, although it won't be 29, the old page 29, which is page 32. If anybody's interested in that. And I spoke a little bit about, what happens if you give a delegation to a committee and what we did with the previous committees which didn't have delegation responsibilities. Next slide, please. So once you've determined your committee structure, then you need to have a think about, well, who's on those committees? Is it everyone? Is it some people? Is it the people that have got an interest? Is it the people that have the skills? Do we need to bring some skills in from outside of the organisation? So you can have committees of the whole. You tend to run into a few issues when you've got every committee or a majority of committees being committees of the whole, those being workload. Sometimes if you've got a committee of the whole and you're having a debate around the table and you go to council, which is the same people around the table again, you're having the same conversation, you might re-debate, re-litigate. There's a possibility of duplication if the issue that you've got is relevant to more than one committee. So having clear lines in there. And sometimes when everybody's involved, you have the potential for either, if you're really good at managing your time, there's limited opportunity for discussion, or and that means in terms of your personal airtime, or you don't get the opportunity to scrutinise the matter in the detail that you might otherwise want to, or that might make for good decision making. So smaller committee structures tend to have 6 to 8, but it's horses for courses in terms of the numbers of people that you might want. And noting that the Office of the Auditor General recommends about 4 or 5 for risk and assurance, particularly with the external, with the external chair being an independent member. So one of the benefits, or some of the benefits of having smaller committees, mean that you can develop your competency as members, either in terms of whether that's a skill set on the committee, if you have a particular role on that committee, in terms of your interest area or subject matter expertise. It enables you to focus on matters in more depth, and it makes it easier for the public to participate because it's less formal, you have more time. And I've already talked about bringing other people in. I've got a point about remuneration up there. Paul will come and talk to the remuneration aspects at the end of this presentation, but there is, the Remuneration Authority allows for councils to have some sort of discretion over how they allocate their remuneration pool, and whether you want to recognise particular roles such as chairing roles for committees, acknowledging the extra workload that chairs often have in relation to their chairing responsibilities. So now to the good stuff. We sort of had this conversation with the previous council, and I think we might have introduced it with some of you new folk as well, just to share some of this previously. So we asked the last triennium of council what some of their thoughts and considerations were about the structure that they had worked under for the previous year, and I'll pop that up, or previous term, I'll pop that up in a moment. And in terms of structure, I'm going to go through all of these. Here's some of their thoughts. This is not the unified view of council per se, but actually some of the reflections of individual councillors that we've captured and put up there. I just want to talk to some of them. an integrated management, catchment management committee. Waikato actually have one of those. It very much reflects the structure that we have at an operational level in terms of the matters that are traversed through that. The key responsibilities are around setting objectives, priorities, and levels of service for the operation, maintenance, and renewal of the flood protection and land drainage infrastructure that Waikato have. It's also about setting the visions, goals for catchment and river restoration work programs, and then overseeing the performance and effectiveness of the activities of council, which is, flood protection, land drainage, river management, biosecurity, biodiversity, catchment planning, and emergency management. So and I'm reading that from the terms of reference, which I've got here. That's sort of, that's one way of them doing it as an example. Committee alignment with group structures, one of the proposals up there. It is a matter that's traversed in the LGNZ guide. It is an option if that's what you want to do. One of the challenges is that it can lead to siloing of not only information and relationships, but also it doesn't necessarily enable everybody to get across everything as a range of councillors, giving that sense of the whole of the work that council does. And the advice from our GNZ is that it's better if committees, span multiple departments or areas of work. And we won't get into it in huge amounts of detail today, but catchment liaison committees, these are advisory bodies to council, and so there's a potential that the nature of that relationship has been impacted by the nature of the way in which we rated our rating work. So this is a live and ongoing conversation that we've got about, how do we preserve the value of that connection with those parts of the communities, and then, what does it need to look like for us going forwards?
Oh, just about advisory committees, the Wire Working Party is also an advisory committee. I don't know if there's any others. We got a legal opinion from Wynne Williams in 2000, you remember that, 2020 or something around that. Just setting out, what the Wire Working Party was. We just had a meeting at the Wire Working Party. I was the chair. I'm not going to be the chair anymore. We are, the three of us that were there, Roger and Paul and I will put together something for a report, and probably not next council, but maybe the one after that.
Yep.
But I think it would be fair to say that we're quite keen to review the terms of reference for that committee, so that it's a bit clearer as to what it actually does. Yep. So that would be good if we could do that at some stage.
Yep. I think there's enormous benefit in us doing that. Be really clear. The purpose of what this whole thing is today is to make sure that we are clear about what decision-making structures we have, what is a decision-making structure, what is a advisory structure, how they all come together. So that'd be great. Look forward to that.
Well, it didn't, but I'm looking at the reviewing of the catchment liaison committees, and I know since I was a co-chair that we went through multiple levels of reviews. We actually end up with a terms of reference that clearly stated where each one goes, but given that each one of them lines up with an FMU, and you think that would be a focus going forward, then I'm just interested in what your comments around reviewing it would be.
These are only feedback in regards to comments, so it's not like we've had a decision or anything. Obviously, we'll be looking at that in due course.
Yeah, and I guess the other one actually would be, I was wondering about levels of overlap, so between finance and performance and risk and assurance, that how much is the old committee structure overlapped and sort of dealt with the same issues almost? So is there any feedback on how they were working?
Can I ask councillor Rodway, because
Well,
you chaired one and sat in another.
it used to be one,
They're all the same.
and that was divided into those two. But still, the agendas are pretty weighty of both of them now. They seem to have expanded to fit their purpose somehow. So I wouldn't be too keen on combining them. Really, I think the agendas would be far too big. I think after into the afternoon, you getting a bit weary. So I wouldn't be too keen on doing that. But I don't think there is much overlap really. The staff are very good at making sure that there's no overlap of the issues. So.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of things on that end. So we actually separated off the risk portion of the finance and performance because, firstly, it's the preferred method by the Auditor General. We don't want to upset him necessarily or her. But also it meets that slightly distant view of the other decisions that are made, and it elevates. It's more about it's about the risk, and so as a new group, we're going to have to determine what our risk appetite is and what we want to be alerted to and at what stage, and that. I don't know any organisation these days who doesn't have a separate risk and audit because it keeps it separate and gives a better overview for any of that information that needs to come to it. Finance and performance are more about literally finance and performance. The risk, the current method of working is to have risk separated so that we've got an independent chair, so there are questions that he asks that we wouldn't necessarily, because we've come from within the system, we wouldn't necessarily ask. And it's new for us, so we're all learning rapidly in that space. But it's definitely a much wiser thing to do, I think. And there's not much overlap of agenda items because the risk part of it looks at the decisions that are made over here. How risky are they, and what do we need to know about them?
Yeah, I think it's like you look at all the other councils there. It's a consistent committee now. That's from the audit.
It's not much overlap.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think most organisations do have a separate risk and audit committee, and
it's embedded there. So it's
yeah. So looking back at some of that feedback, things have changed and whether we have some ability moving forward with the local government commission view of whether our setup of committees or even structure if the process starts for our nomination. So we need to also now start, because that was sort of before that and didn't really include that. So we need to sort of almost have that in the back of our mind to set ourselves up to win, to provide good leadership through that process if it does happen. So whether that is, that's something that we should all sort of try and include in our thinking before we meet back and make some definite ideas on where we're going. Just, I know it says it's definitely, the investment committee and the finance performance. Said there in the previous file.
Paula, can you go back?
But I actually questioned whether there was much that we gained out of that split. So I know it gave more introduction to the investment, and there's a lot of people really focused on that. We haven't actually gained much out of it, I don't think. So
on the investment committee.
Yeah, the investment side, we pulled it out of finance and performance, didn't we?
Yeah.
As an independent.
No.
It was created. It was company Southland.
I sort of don't know whether we've got
Didn't exist.
the benefits that we wanted.
I think
There hasn't been much time.
just to clarify, the investment committee, it was basically set reality is we start looking at sell down of Southport and those things, and we need the expertise and also working through the directorships and things like that, fees. So it sort of started off with that, and then so that's probably where the basis of it, where it started.
So
No,
personally,
there is a reason for it. It was actually to give
in
some
my
clarity,
opinion,
I guess.
and personally, I don't know that we've got the benefit out.
I think in the future it will be a lot more involved too.
Well, I might-
if we do sell down it.
More than you think.
Sorry, have you?
Well, I was
in
just going to
regards to
say, in terms of the investment committee, not only the sell down of the shares, but an oversight into the whole SIPO of our fund management, the reserve lands that we've got and how we might best use them. But they might also be a work unit that has a look at the way in which we might want to occupy a space in town, whether this is suitable, what would it cost to do it up, should we be shifting? And so that'd be a unit that could do all that work as well. So they do have quite a workload potentially.
I understand,
Yeah.
and looking back to the previous, when it was public excluded notification of AGM, I was really upset about because it didn't come to us in a timely manner. And later on, it was found out that it didn't come to us at all. We sort of had to go after it from that large investment of council. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I would have thought that the reasoning committee should have been notified well and truly ahead of anyone else. So that's, there needs to be some, it's not terms of references. We just need to make sure that it's actually going to be there for the purpose that we want it to be there.
There was also having that relationship with our investments, which hopefully looking forward will be a lot to deal with those situations. I know we can certainly delve into that when we set that committee up. Work through that. Alistair.
What worries me at the moment is that we've got a problem with communications and information flow to get out there. I believe that part of the performance, maybe split the performance off from finance, because that's quite a big portfolio, and run a simple one on performance of the whole operation, because that is our image. Our people see us out from outside. And we need, as far as the time that we've spent running around doing things, getting things right, we need that to be starting to run effectively. So I would put forward to split the performance out of finance and performance and put it as a separate thing, because it is the most important thing for this council.
Okay, thanks. Alistair, you got something?
I was just going to observe, Alistair, I acknowledge your comment. I would suggest it possibly anecdotal, the claim that we have a public engagement problem. I mean, I would want to see some data quantifying the dimension of that before we make decisions that cut and slash the structure of our existing committee arrangement. And there could potentially be other ways of responding to a deficit if that was indeed the concern. But to make the claim that we have a communications or public engagements problem without having some data to quantify, is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? Is it isolated to one pocket of the Southland? I would be a little bit cautious about, leaping in and using that as the basis for restructuring our committees.
I would suggest that we do investigate that, and I'm happy with what you're saying, but I sure as hell know the amount of stuff out that we have to carry on with. It definitely indicates there is a difficulty there.
That's a good point. Certainly duly noted. Paul, you got something more?
Yeah, well, just to clarify that, because there's a week to talk about it. I just wanted to clarify with Al. You're talking about the finance independent of performance business, operational, organisational, operational performance, separate from finance.
Yes.
Okay. So
because of the importance of that to our image within our community.
It makes me understand more where you're coming from. Organisational, operational performance is totally different.
Cool. Thank you. Lyndall.
Next year, just want to, so that we need to be clear about, and this is my understanding, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. The finance and performance, it's financial performance, it's not the outcomes of the organisation. So I think finance and performance might be a bit of a misnomer in a way, because we're actually talking about the financial performance. So whether we're hitting budget and whether we've, invested wisely, that stuff. The outcomes for the organisation are a different kind of performance. So we just, that's how I understand it, and I think we just have to be clear about what terminology we're using, so we don't confuse the two terms.
Yeah, do you want to add, but correct.
Just to throw another option in the mix, and someone I think that asked around the Taranaki structure for committees, and I think Amy's got it as well, but they've got quite a simple structure, and it's operation and regulatory committee, so they combine operation and regulatory, which used to be a no-no. They used to have to separate regulatory, but moved on. There's a policy and planning committee, which does a lot of the heavy lifting around policy work, obviously. And then there's an executive audit and risk committee. They'll put them all into one. So if you wanted to streamline, there's something to think about. So again, we're not making any calls today.
I mean, Alistair, your point is.
I take what Lyndall said.
Yeah.
So therefore, we need something else there. We are actually measuring the outcomes of our, because it's a multi-million-dollar outfit.
And we do, but maybe it's not around.
I would rather see it from my point, or from our point of view, the extra work that we have to do to get simple things right.
Yeah.
And it goes both ways. It's the ratepayer, and it's also our organisation.
So just to be clear, that is about financial and performance of the numbers.
You got it now.
But you are quite right, there's another thing, and with good look in regards to look at the evidence. And I think I don't know which columns, or what structure, what actually is happening on the ground, how we're performing. That's the discussion we need. Now, move on, Morris and Roger.
Well, I think this is a topic for the Risk and Insurance Committee. And in fact, we have discussed it at the last Risk and Insurance Committee about the risk of not being effective at communicating our business and our goals and ambitions to the public. And so that's a place, in my opinion, that's a place for that. It's very, we've got this independent chairperson, so it's a very good committee, and we get good guidance from the chair, and I think that's the place to discuss those sorts of things that you're concerned about, Alistair. And as I say,
I'm happy to see it go out.
Roger.
That resonates well with me. Circling back to the previous conversation, the website, Environment Southland's website, currently describes an annual perception survey being undertaken, and there appear to be reports annually up until 2021. Perhaps the recent reports, if they exist, or it still continues as it's described on the website, may speak to the evidence around that.
All this, that there is a point that I think personally, that we can do all the comms in the world at times. And I mean, maybe we should always try. I mean, you're trying to get the performance on the ground, understand, getting the information down to the ground level. Everybody, it's very hard to get everybody listened to. I know, I'm trying to say, I know ES is trying, staff are doing a pretty good job at trying to communicate and I'll put the 10-metre buffer zone out. A lot of people said we didn't know anything about that, but it was out there. It had been sort of communicated the year before, but it still doesn't get into.
I think I'm coming from both sides.
Yeah.
That the general public has to do more, and we probably have to do more, but we've got to guide it. And I see it as being different from financial performance in one way, but financial performance also leads into outcomes.
We've just got to work out where to put that's what committee and structure. Sorry. Yes.
You're still going. Sorry, you do have in your pack the terms of reference for the different committees. No, sorry, Paul, still got
Oh, yeah,
a
sorry.
question as well.
Sorry,
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, so after I got clarification before Rob sort of got into it, I was sort of, my head was, because I've written down, my head was thinking regulatory, you know, and finance and performance. Ultimately, the way you described it, Jeremy, we get rid of the and.
It's fine.
Financial performance. Regulatory, and when Rob mentioned, geez, slipped out, hasn't he? That Taranaki do it, and I actually thought, I didn't, until he showed that, I sort of thought, it's a great place to have regulatory and organisational delivery committee. It'd be good to have that set out a wee bit, and not included in financial and performance. Financial performance is one, which is good.
Oh, yeah, look, I was just going to say the terms of reference actually speak to it's more than financial performance. So this is the previous one, okay, previous committee. So you have an option to change there if you would so like. For example, governance oversight of performance, reporting to council, including making recommendations required relating to LGA annual reporting and audit by reviewing periodic high-level output reporting against targets. So this is against our plan, our long-term plan and our annual plan. So it's not just the finances, because the next bullet point talks about reviewing related financial performance against budget. Okay, so there's an opportunity, there's other things here as well about the audit, which actually is covered by risk and assurance these days. So we can have a look at the finer aspects of that if you would like to pursue purely, think about organisational performance and financial performance, if we're talking about functional areas that you would like, and whether they best sit in one committee or you separate those out. Yeah, but just in the context of thinking about the rest of the conversation that we've had today about managing the efficiency and the effectiveness, about the size and the number of your committees as well. Okay, so, you could have 100 committees. No, you don't want to do that. No, right? You just need to think about how you want to weigh or consider those individual functional areas, what might make sense to come together, what might make sense to deal with separately.
Okay.
Right,
David.
and
Jeffrey.
I just see this as there is overlap. It can't help but not be overlap. So if you look at, the Rural Services Committee, so dealing with catchments and dealing with this large stock banking that you're looking at doing, we haven't even had a report about what's happening, wanting to be more for the community, which needs to happen. That's going to have finances in it. And there's going to be questions flowing from that committee as well as the finance one. So you can't have all finance just in one. I don't see how that works because it's interrelated, really. But I think what the terms of reference you've got there do show some things are clearly in one or the other, but there is overlap. So that's the hard thing. But I guess what I took out of it is that it's about time to drill down into, to go into stuff. And if we were to take it all back in council, we would be just breezing over things. So it's like select committee. And so that's the only advantage of having them split up a little, is that you could dig deeper and have a more informed debate. And if you don't have that debate, then we actually drop the ball more often. Just saying.
So, Eric.
Yeah, I'm getting a wee bit.
Were you agreeing though?
No, I'm moving on.
Okay, yeah, but
But what I'm gonna say.
you were waving your hand, but I thought you were agreeing.
No, I
Sorry.
wasn't agreeing. Hell no.
Well,
And David brought the point up that finance is going to end up in regional services because of all that Kanoa funding. And that's going to be massive. And whether we decide, I don't know what the group feels, whether that Kanoa funding overseeing goes into regional services and makes that a fairly strong and big operation, but have control over their own destiny. That was where I was coming from. And you, I'm
But
not,
look,
Sorry. Carry on.
no, I think we're getting a wee bit bogged down. I'm a little bit unsure of process here. There's a lot of relevant points being made, but I just want to know how we're going to crystallise what we're talking about now before we actually set up committee structure. What's the process for doing that? I don't know that there's a huge mood for change, but there's a mood to do some adaptations to make the thing work better. And I just want to know how we do that.
Right, so can I just answer the question and then
Should be
just-
questions, not at this stage,
yes.
Chairman.
So
Thank you.
I've got one more slide just to cover with you about one other piece of feedback, and then I'm going to stick up the current structure as the straw
Right, thank
man
you.
and go,
That's what I
right,
need to get to.
what are we going to do with this?
Look, I was just going to suggest, I think what we need to do is put all of those different layers that we need to look at on the screen and then decide then how we can build a straw
I think
man
we're
of
getting to that.
what sort of committees we want, because we certainly don't want a whole heap of committees. And there will be enough overlap there that they can be incorporated together. So
Look, if I can make a point, before, when we were doing this feedback, I was trying to say, how can we streamline this about timelines and just trying to get best value out of everyone around this council table. With some deeper thought and everything, I said, well, actually, I looked at it and I indicated, I said, well, we can't actually, probably don't need to change a lot, but it's actually adding in, where does the Kanoa funding get their respective needs into these committees? There's a couple, you're quite right, Alistair, if there's a performance on the, talking about financial, different type of performance, where do we add that into those council? And that's the question I was sort of going to say to the councillors that were here before, what was actually wrong with our structures? And there probably wasn't a hell of a lot. We were actually covering everything reasonably well. And that was I came to a conclusion, but it's actually really important. We've got other things we need to give the time and respect for, make sure we cover those things. So, but that's where I ended up. But
Yep. And can I just sort of just reflect on that conversation, particularly around the funding and the finance, because we're talking about what sort of structure we might need to consider that information in. But Paula, if you just go to the next slide, which is other, I wonder if it might be about clarifying, and because we did traverse some broader matters when we were talking about previous council with this, I actually wonder if there's a consideration about how we're reporting and what it is that you need to be seeing. So if I think about the Kanoa funding, for example, under, I guess, former council, there's sort of three broad ways we would consider that at different levels. From a risk and assurance point of view, we're interested in making sure that we are a good funding partner to government. So we're thinking about the risk of how we are contracting for that money, making sure that we're delivering on our reporting requirements and our outcome requirements, right? That's about preserving that partnership, preserving that relationship, being a good partner to work with central government. So that's the risk aspect of that. The financial aspect of that is really all about the timing of the monies coming in and out. How does it affect our organisation-wide cash flow when we're looking at all of our government-funded projects? What's the ins and outs of that from a purely financial enterprise-wide accounting perspective? And then, and I can't speak to it, and maybe my colleague Lucy could speak to it, but then as I understand it, when you're thinking about regional services, how we're spending this money, is it on track? When you're getting into the detail of where's it going, for what purpose, progress and performance in relation to specific outcomes on the ground, that's where you're looking at that aspect of the financial performance. So I wonder, I'm not solving the problem, but I'm just inviting you to think about what problem it is that you are trying to solve in this way, and whether the existing structure in the committee is there, because actually we're looking at a financial matter, but we're looking at it through different lenses, or whether we want to lump everything all together in one pot and consider it in its entirety. So I just want to.
I feel you've missed the point. The point is that we've got to start measuring what we're getting done for the money we're putting in.
Yep.
Now, if you listen to the Auckland thing, what's his name, Brown, has a committee basically measuring financial performance. A total committee, because he's sick of this money going from here to there and nobody looking at it. And I think when it goes into regional services, they have an interest in doing and making sure that that's done properly.
Yeah, I'm going to get into the detail of the business plan, reporting, but anyway, I won't go there.
Just wanted to say, I think I agree with you both.
Shit, you can't do that.
Well, yes, I can, and I will. Because the reporting, to Amy's point, what perhaps we're not understanding is the way that they're reporting it to us, and so that's why I agree with that part of it, because actually that work is mostly being done, but we're not seeing it as clearly as we might want to. So we want to, agreeing with you, but to Amy's point, maybe the reports and the decisions that we're making are not being brought to us in a clear enough way for us. That's all. Anyway, I know you want.
Someone will be able to explain. I thought we do have reporting dollars spent on the ground. Like we're
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
true. We do get a brief business plan.
yeah, the business plan
Yeah,
that
but we
comes
don't
with
have
it.
the next bit.
But what it, so
Our big,
the effectiveness, the actual, is it where the money's been invested, are we getting the outcomes?
Or do you mean the environmental outcomes?
no, the outcomes.
The outcomes,
because
why we're
no
doing
doubt
that money,
It
why,
will be environmental.
If the return on investment.
but we do know
But
really
also
where the
the
money's going.
environmental.
But that's just reporting, asking for getting the reporting back and carrying on down that chain of
That's fine.
command, so to speak. So it could be still on the same committee as such. Yeah. Yes.
Back to the slide, just very briefly, and then I'll stick up the straw man and you can tell us what you think about that. So some of the other things, and again, I think it's really important to consider this when you're also thinking about your committee structures. These are important things that came up as well, is, how can you use the committee structures as opportunities for development, for example, having chairs and co-chairs. What is the frequency of the meetings that you have, and thinking about how you make those effective. Again, there's a commentary there, keep Stratton Pole as a committee of the whole, but again, thinking about just drawing that out to a broader principle, should everybody be involved in that committee or any other committee, or do you want them smaller? And are there matters, and I think, to Alistair's original point, that that we should be considering in a particular way, whether that's, lease land and flood infrastructure, or whether it's our communications program, all of that. These are all things that are important considerations. So, thank you, Paula.
Actually, Rebecca, that's got the.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca. Right, Rebecca. Before, sorry, now can you go back? I want to just come back to the last point on this slide. Like, whatever you choose to go into the triennium with does not have to be the thing that you leave the triennium with by way of structure. And I can't remember who mentioned it over here. Oh, Paul, it was you, about the Local Government Commission. That's going to get traction and wheels. It's early doors yet, but there's going to be probably about a 2-year program of working that through. Okay, so it may be that we don't have enough information now to have enough workload for a committee to do, but it could be in 6 to 12 months' time It does. The regulatory reforms, which are numerous and will be coming shortly, but aren't here yet, will, you know, that's gonna roll out and snowball over the next 12 months. So again, we don't necessarily know enough today to inform a committee structure, but 6 or 12 months down the line, it could very well be that you want to change how you're currently operating in order to give effect to that. And I just want to reassure you and reaffirm that you can do that. These are decisions that you can make, and that would be sensible to do, actually.
Just for an example, we have, you know, Phil's talked about this, integrated catchment management committees. Where do they fit into the future? And that might be in the future where we start looking at whole catchment scenarios. And that's where maybe the regional services may morph into those things. So, but that might be in a year or 2 years time. So we've been talked about that. We'll talk about it right at the moment.
Oh, look, and we haven't. Sorry.
No, but that's part of obviously the regional forum programs and things like that. So we'll look at that in due course.
We haven't talked about portfolios, and that's, you know, that was topical at ORC. You know, they've elected to have a structure which, as I read it, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, anybody else who read it differently, that retains the council structure but gives individual council members portfolio responsibility for developing an area of expertise and interest in a particular area of council. It's interesting, if you actually read to the very back of the Local Government New Zealand report, there's a section in the third appendix about portfolio structures, and in fact Wellington had a review of their governance structures done. I can't remember what year that was, but the feedback from, it was Wellington City Council, but the feedback from that was in 2021, was to disestablish the portfolio approach, and that's on page, if you're interested, page 54. It outlines the pros and cons of that. But look, this might be something that, you know, if you're thinking about your development as elected members during the term, that you can consider, and we can have a look at if it's something you want to entertain through you know, when we get to our next review of committee structures. So just want to put that there on the table for you as well. Okay, back to the diagram. Well, so this is our committee structure. Well, this was our committee structure last triennium. We had council, full council, which was the decision-making body. Then there were 7 main committees that sat underneath that. Stratton Pole was a committee of the whole. As I said before, it had a couple of mana whenua representatives. All the other committees were smaller committees. Regional services, there were 7 on that, and 2 mana whenua reps, 6 on regulatory, 5 on finance and performance, 7 in risk and assurance, and 6 in the investment committee. Our chief executive subcommittee had 7. Oh no, sorry, I've got that wrong. Sorry, the chief executive subcommittee, actually I couldn't do the maths in my head. It was the chairs of the committees. Yep. And the committees also included the chair ex officio, and the chair wasn't in the numbers that I read.
That's a point of clarification then. So there's a couple at the bottom. So there's the regional transport and the civil defence.
Yes.
I mean, the civil defence seems to just be, you have a delegate and that's what you have. And then the regional transport only had 3. And it seems like it's sort of almost predetermined too. Is it sort of?
So those are joint committees, and we traversed that at the last council.
That's right.
Council meeting, in joint.
So if you look at strategy and policy, it had 10 out of 12 councillors. So It's almost the,
Once it's 12, it's a committee of the whole.
yeah,
Yeah, 12 out of 12.
That, Linda might be able to talk to that. But obviously that was in regards, obviously regarding the plan change to Tahi, and we thought, well, all council should be there making some of that. This is important, highly important. Committee. Is that
And
sort
it
of
meant
the-
that we weren't regurgitating.
at the council meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we did because the committee, I'm sorry, Amy, but a committee of the whole terminology means that it has delegated authority, but this was just
Yeah.
this was just a committee of all of the council.
Yeah.
But it didn't have delegated authority, so it still had to make the recommendations to full council and then council at a high level rediscuss them and then.
But is that mainly because it gives you extra time to discuss those issues that you wouldn't have at a council meeting anyway?
Well, yeah, no, and it actually came down to attendance in some ways as well, because it meant that all councillors were more inclined to come to an SNP meeting because they appreciated the significance of the decisions that committee were recommending. So that was part of it.
It's got Paul.
Yeah,
Fill
thank
it
you.
out.
Yeah, can I just remind everyone to make sure that they let the chair know when they want to speak? It's just, I'm putting my hand up and I'm holding it up for extended periods and then people just come and speak.
I've been writing them down.
Just wanting to clarify that before we move on. We need to go on as start as we want to go on. With regards to finance and performance, just the advice I got from the last triennium, I slipped on the finance and performance committee partway through. It wasn't an easy process. So make your mind up now what you want to be on, because if you want to get on it halfway through, it becomes a wee bit of a difficult process. Easier to get off, I remember I was told, but hard to get on the committee. So I didn't think I was very interested in it, but after reading the reports as a triennium went on, I thought that was where I wanted to be. So, thank you.
Clarified the climate change committee here is the subcommittee.
Committee, yeah, so
And
it's a
to
subcommittee.
observe that the regional climate change working group was probably more akin to a portfolio commitment, albeit it wasn't labelled as a committee, but it was certainly a considerable amount of work.
Yeah.
That was required across, again, a joint setting across both TAs.
I think that obviously I know Phil did a huge amount of work in Morrison involved. That was like when we talk about remuneration and things like that, that was probably did more work than most involved in that too. So when we're setting anything these subcommittees up, and we need to understand the workloads and with the time involved too. Al. Yes.
Yeah, regional services, I think there's a movement, but especially if the Kanoa funding goes there, that's all councillors, because there's a hell of a lot of money going to pass through there in this coming triennium. And I would still like somewhere to have this reassessment, or I'm not good with words, as you probably worked out, but a reassessment to assess where the whole operation's going. And that communications, the feedback, just getting things so that we've got a tie-in. So I'd like another one up there, please, Amy.
I can't do it in real time, but anyway.
What do you want to
So
put a name on it? Just throw it out there. But does it need to be another one separate?
Well, maybe,
Where does
maybe
it
not,
fit in?
but it's quite important. And in the last triennium, we got hammered because of it. And I'm sorry I haven't got the data.
One thing, if just going back to numbers and committee sizes, so as any councillor can be standing, can come and sit and debate in any committee. It's whether they got the vote, no vote. So you can still be involved in these committees. And but often you'll have, there's a huge range of skills around here and you'll have interests. And it's about spreading the workload. Personally, I think that's really important because there'll be certain committees that, hey, that's my thing. I want to be involved in. So it doesn't mean you can't come along, and if there's an point of interest or a topic in that meeting, I mean, that's the thing, a lot of us do that. So it's, but so that's, I'm just sort of making that clearer, you know, to make sure everyone knows that too. But like, I know what you're talking about. It's about trying to find it. I think we need a whole separate committee on regards to that. But
Well, I do.
I know. I'm just trying to work out. But I
I'm only one as
understand.
well.
Yeah, but I understand what you're wanting. You can put it in there. It's an important thing somewhere. So
Just put in somewhere else, it gets lost.
right.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was over this way first.
Yep.
Here.
Well, no, Phil hasn't.
Just to clarify, are we now
Yeah.
going, are we now going to a point where we get to offer suggestions
Yeah, well,
for?
that's
Yeah.
Okay.
probably.
So I guess what I would suggest is that we have got a lot of change coming at us in the near future, and we've suffered through a lot of change recently with things like plan change to Otahi being paused, a hiatus on planning. I guess what I'm suggesting is we don't want to change too much because we've also got tectonic shifts coming with RMA reform. And that's going to play out in the next 12 months. We will have a better sense for how that plays out and impacts upon us in the near future. I kind of agree with Al on performance, and I guess, you know, I look at our mission statement, a thriving Southland is the vision, but improving Southland's environment is the essence of our mission statement. And I'm not confident that we can put a hand on our heart and say we've made improvements in the last 3 years to our environment. So, you know, I suspect that, you know, our performance is subject to greater scrutiny, but appreciate that it takes science and 5 years to establish movement from baselines, etc. What I would suggest, and I'm channeling the members of the regional forum when I do this, is that the regional services committee, I would really advocate for that to become an integrated catchment management committee moving forward. And I say that on the basis that there's limits that might yet drive change in our water quality and environment, but the social challenge, the social change is far more demanding than the technical change around setting limits. You've got to bring the community on board, and there was a sense that Hawara plans for each reporting catchment, and in time supported by Hawara committees, community members taking ownership of the outcomes in their catchments through the Hawara committees. And it seems to me that the most meaningful way to promote and start the journey towards that multi-year outcome is to restructure and have an integrated catchment management committee that takes a more integrated perspective of what is occurring in respect of, you know, the things that are occurring in a catchment level. I think that is one thing we could do today and could start the process. We've got 12 reporting catchments. Not all of them are ready to go. Waikawa is right. You might argue the Mataura is one that you could focus on as a priority, along with Hokanui's Reimagining Mataura initiative. And then learn from your early experiences to inform the development of Hawara plans for the other reporting catchments. I know that the regional forum imagined that this would be achievable in a far shorter timeline and expected that Hawara plans for all reporting catchments would be developed by now. That's fallen by the wayside over the last 3 years with planning hiatus and the Tai-Ho signals on plan change to Otahi. So I'd be really advocating for that integrated catchment management committee as the reshaped, rebranded regional service committee. And leaving everything else largely unchanged, but noting that there are some supporting initiatives that would mean that we do manage our efforts across all of the committees more effectively. So a monthly catch-up with the chairs to strategise what other work plans against each agenda item, agendas for each of the committees.
Thank you. So you've got questions, but
If you've got questions, what Phil said, you should
yeah,
take
well,
them
Phil
now.
just put, yep, okay. Morris and David.
Well, yeah, I agree with what Phil says. But the point I wanted to make was, if you want to be on a committee at the start, as Paul says, put your hand up. There's no restriction to anybody going on any committee who want to be in it. When we look at the terms of reference, you know, some of those are a little bit vague, but you can see what those are, and if you're interested in that, put your hand up at the appropriate time and say, I want to be on that committee. And that will put you on the committee. The only problems are the investment committee. We've had a limited number of people on that. We've got 2 independent people on the investment committee already, so we don't want all the councillors to be on that committee. That's the only exception. So please do that. And if Paul found out, you know, you're not on a committee and you want to be on one, it's not so easy to get.
Very good. David.
Just on what you brought up then, Phil, about changing it to integrated catchment management, perceptions when you start talking about limit setting and all that stuff. And we don't even know what integrated catchment management is, because we had that the other day. We actually don't have a definition of exactly what we're talking about. As soon as you start changing names and coming up with a whole new thing, there's an expectation there's going to be a whole lot of new stuff, and it unsettles people. And there is enough angst with this council in rural Southland about where we're going, that I think that wouldn't go down that well, actually, Phil. But you know, let's work on this stuff in a normal way, but to actually start talking about something that we don't even know what it is.
Just to clarify though, it is very well defined in the Regional Forum report, and it'll be worth engaging with that report to see the range of recommendations in that and how it was defined in the integrated catchment management itself. So it's not new, or
it's not new terminology, but we have an actual definition right here and now of what it is for Southland. But I am concerned that talks around slow the flow and all that stuff, when we're going to be spending huge amounts of money on stock banking and real projects. So yeah, I just think there's more than enough to focus on without changing the name, and let's understand, keep some things the same so that we can take ratepayers with us.
Right, okay. Now, I agree largely with what Phil said. And when it comes to reform, I say to myself, what's broken? What do we need to fix? Not what we can do better. What is actually broken that we need to do significant reform? And the big game in town is going to be comes out of the local authority reforms that are coming towards us. And to restructure ourselves now in any dominant way and then face it again later on, or we may not even exist, who knows? I just think we need to be focusing on what we can do better rather than a huge restructure. And let me just say this about empirical evidence about what's wrong and what's not wrong, and some decades working with constituents across the different races. 5% of people will give you 90% of your work and 95% of your opinion. And when Phil calls for data, that's very important, that we actually have an understanding. Is this a big issue, or is it something that's got a bit of momentum with some loud noise rather than an actual event that's there? So now, in terms of improving these committees, it's not that we make them bigger. You know, when you look at how Parliament works, 123 current people with select committees with about 8 people on them. They get a delegated responsibility. We're actually above that, because on our committees, you can go along and speak. You're not isolated from being there and contributing if there's an issue that you actually want to. And we've all got workloads, which are our own business, whatever else we're doing, and whatever other commitments we've got. And so I think we don't need huge reform, but let's just have our focus on how we can do it better.
Yeah. Thanks. I've got Linda.
I can go Nick at the end. I'm waiting.
Just following on from Morris and saying that, you know, it's easier to change. What's wrong with, you know, we've just seen every 12 months we could make a change in our committee structures. How difficult is it to move from one committee to the other? Where Paul found it difficult, but can we make it easy? We're the ones who make the rules.
Look, I'm interested in understanding what was difficult about it, but I don't know that that's a conversation for today. in
No,
terms of thinking
but to
about-
clarify
Yeah.
that you can move.
It can move,
It
it can move.
Okay, it's just gotta be signed off by the council.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reality.
Right, let me see. So there's a number of things for me. I've been thinking about this a lot because I know we've talked about it, and I initially didn't disagree with Phil and the need for an ICM committee, but on reflection, I saw some fishhooks with that. So, but before I go there, I just want to say a couple of things. Firstly, about the size of committees. For me, that comes down to us being able to trust in our fellow councillors, and trust that if there's a small committee making recommendations to council, that we trust them to do that. And so when that recommendation, because it's not a decision at that point, when that recommendation comes to full council, those of us who weren't in that committee can question in an open, publicly accessible way, transparent way, and make any changes to the recommendations that we like. So as much as I, like to know everything that's going on personally, and I go to a lot of the committee meetings, I ultimately trust the members of that committee to make a well-informed and reasoned and open-minded decision to bring it back to council so that we can discuss it at a council meeting. And I think, as we bring new people on board, that's a really important element of what we need to keep in mind, because we have to trust each other. I just want to say that out loud.
Yep.
Secondly, we also need to be mindful of the internal structure of the organisation as it currently is. So committees that somehow, don't overcomplicate the internal structure so that workloads for staff are unreasonable because they're having to work across, a different work stream because they need it to come to the committee. So I think we just need to be mindful of that internal structure when we're thinking about our committees.
Thank you.
I'm not finished, sorry. So I've written down my thoughts about how we could embed ICM, Phil, particularly into some of the other committees, so that it's not siloed as its own little thing, because we're trying to not do silos. And an ICM committee would be effective only when policy sets the direction, operations deliver the catchment programs, and regulatory monitors the outcomes. So if we can tie those things together through the existing committee structure, I think that would help. I've got all this written down so I can send it to you, but it also would strengthen catchment thinking across the whole organisation. There's a whole lot of stuff here, but I think there's probably a way, and I think I've found one, that we can embed ICM better into mostly the existing structure, although I think we need to have a look at the regulatory regional services terms of reference, because the workloads are not quite so that it's given the manner that it deserves without adding another committee or overloading that chair, because being chair of the ICM committee would be a big task to keep it outcomes focused and across the organisation. Not saying it's impossible, but it would be a big committee to manage. So if you will indulge me, I'll email you all with my suggestion.
Thanks. One point I was going to say, and I know Phil's and I have talked about this, but I mean, I'm trying to work out the how we're trying to. We've just had a big restructure, and a question for staff that we have with our CEO was, when we restructured, was there, and you were planning for this in the restructure, because it will be a major change, or probably it's going to be a large operation. or to go into a structure like this, because you've got to bring everything together and working planning and things like that. And I'm just understanding, was the management, because it's you're going to be doing this, we did something like that. Do you have the right system in place, the structure to be able to deal with it? Because you're dealing with a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden this might change the whole direction a wee bit, more focus on things. So I'm just trying to understand, was this a discussion when you were doing the restructure that we will be going to there, we need to have these people in place?
In terms of how we report to council.
Oh, well, it's how we put an integrated management system into play.
George, talk to that, Lucy.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Jeremy. I think I would just say that my job title is kind of dark because integrated capital management is literally the whole business. And in an ideal world, what the council has set us on a journey on is integrating how we manage our catchments across the whole region and to break down the silos that exist within our business to enable multiple outcomes to be achieved across our catchments. So I'm not anti or pro a committee for that, but I think as a concept, it is one that you have bought into already, and that we as staff would definitely thinking about as we traverse the restructure discussions. On a number of occasions, I advocate for my job description. My job title not being my job title, but it is what it is for now. And to David's point, maybe it will be something else in future that people can understand that I'm mostly just doing the operations. But I agree with Lyndall's point too, in terms of it should weave into other committees. The strategy and policy committee is useful for that. Regional services will give you your line by line what our contractors are and how we've spent our money on various things. So yeah, I think it's a concept that's pretty well understood, but we haven't nailed it down entirely organisationally. And I think that is council, Carcoa, everybody's job, not just mine, not just a committee either. I think it would need to be weaved across a number of different things. And to Phil's point, it is a multi-year change that we're talking about. This is not a thing we're going to get sorted tomorrow, but it's a thing that we're invested in.
So is it as simple as changing the name of committee? So that's we're drawing. No, I'm just saying because it's a long-term discussion and growing into integrated catchment. Because we're not going to do this in 2 weeks. You know, I'm just saying, what are we doing?
You would need to amend the terms of reference. It's not just a name change. There are terms of reference.
Yep.
And amendments that would be required.
Sorry, Eric, I'm well ahead of you.
Sorry, I'm just clarifying.
I think it's the change that we are for this council for the next triennium in relation to integrated catchment management isn't wholly going to be sorted by the changing the title.
No.
Which wasn't, I don't think, what Phil was.
No, it's not.
But I think I would just caution against calling a thing a thing.
Yeah.
And then assuming that group can do all that needs to be done in terms of integration. Which I don't think is what Phil was actually saying.
I agree with
But
I'm just looking at the now, too, saying we just trying to see. I know Paul's got something. I'm just trying to get clarification.
No, I understand that, Jeremy, thank you very much.
Hey, I just don't want to workload a system.
I understand there's some really valid points from everyone here. We should take this all away and think about it. You know, forming the correct committees at the start is going to give the best outcomes. We're all sitting here and we're talking about performance and everything else. The same from our committees and ourselves. You know, performance. We want to perform the best we can in our roles within the organisation, and whether we set it up properly at the start, or we may not set it up exactly properly, but we will set it up for a better outcome next time. And then there's also the adage of staying the same. But then part of the issue we've got with the local government commission, looking at all councils, a bit of stagnation is not going to go well. That sort of thought. They're not going to look at us and think, geez, you're not being very proactive. We need more out of an organisation, more out of a council. So staying the same may not be the way forward, but it would be good to think about this all of us coming to the workshop to work out what we want to do later on. And to Eric's point regarding 5%, 95% of the work, I noted figures that was 51,000 noise complaints out of air reports in Australia last year, and 24,000 was from one person. Equated to one for every 7 flights out of Perth. The second best was 4,000 from a guy in Brisbane. So you're right.
Depending whether the plane's made any changes or
Well,
not.
nearly 50%. So I just wanted to say that.
Like a compound.
You're just reinforcing Phil's point, it's a terms of reference for the committee.
Yeah.
So things don't need to get lost, they can be, as long as they're reflected in the terms of reference, you hold that committee to account. And the other thing is the organisation will report through whatever committee structure you decide. So that's the other key thing.
Okay, look, what did you?
Yeah, just I wanted to mention particularly, I spoke to somebody who knows far more about these things than I do, and he suggested a catchment-based budgeting model, which I thought was a really interesting approach. In brief, it would show climate impact, catchment outcomes, and alignment with LTP goals. And that kind of actually made me go, oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. I haven't quite got all of it in my brain, but actually, to your point often, Alistair, about wanting to know how it is, a catchment-based budget model might help, and I'm happy to piece that out with Patrick or somebody who will know that. No.
So Morris, Phil, do you want?
Well, Mr. Chairman, in order to make a little bit of progress, I have to confess to people I've got to go at 3 o'clock. I thought that's when this meeting was supposed to end anyway. Can we agree to stick with the existing committees for the purposes of setting up those committees at their next meeting, when that's to be done formally? Because I don't, we can get into the nitty-gritty and try and change things around a bit. I don't know if it's going to provide any great improvement on what we've got now. So with the exception of the climate change subcommittee, which I was the chairperson of last year, I would recommend as chair that be included in the strategy and policy committee, because we only had 2 meetings. I think it was 2 meetings in the whole term, in the whole 3 years. And all of the matters that are in the terms of reference for that committee were actually dealt with by the regional climate change committee that Phil was the chair of. So my suggestion would be that we don't really need that climate change subcommittee.
Lucy, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I just was reflecting to my colleague to my right as well about the regional services committee. One of the problems from the last training was it wasn't all of you, it was quite small compared to what the matters were being traversed at regional at the strategy and policy. And in relation to the climate change work and the previous conversations you were having about Carnoa and money coming through and how it works, and to an integrated catchment approach, if the climate change working group suggestion was to go to strategy and policy for a strategic input, I would suggest you might consider that the framework for action piece should be sitting in a regional services kind of operational delivery space once you've got it to a point where it's in operational delivery land. So, and again, that regional services function, there's a lot of stuff that goes there, previous training, so I agree that tweaks to the term of reference and more of you on it.
We'll hear from Phil.
Well, just to clarify though, I just think what Morris was commenting on was the subcommittee, not the regional climate change working group.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just to clarify that.
Yeah, just so.
Which is, and that subcommittee is very focused on ES's response. What is the ES internal response to climate change?
And sorry, Chair, to Phil's point, actually that now kind of comes through the risk and assurance committee, because all of that stuff is part of our risk reporting, etc.
So can we just have some relevant agreement? Obviously, we have SMP, the regulatory, finance, performance, risk and assurance. They're the basic regional services. Obviously, we're talking about in ICM discussion, but that's going to be as we. When do you think? Like I'm trying.
Sooner the better would be my response as to when. The sooner the better, because there's so much work to be done.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take so many years to work through. If you defer it by another 12 months, it's probably going to add another 2 years to the end state journey anyway. So in my mind, there's no reason why you couldn't move to it now. You wouldn't develop Hawara plans for every 12 reporting catchments. You would do it for the ones that are right. Waikawa have already asked for it. They've got an integrated catchment management plan with no governance arrangement for it from a community perspective. Mataura seems ripe and ready to go in the near future. So sooner rather than later, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got in terms of community engagement and lack of engagement, whereas Hawara committees provide a platform for the community to engage around the management of water quality at your catchment level.
So we go back to the terms of reference. Can we set up, if we went there, I'm talking about, is this going to get logged in at 20th of November?
Well, we've got the existing terms of reference from the Waikato, who have already got an integrated catchment management plan. It looks like a pretty good fit. I've already got a draft of what an integrated catchment management terms of reference would look like for Southland. ChatGPT helps me with that. That's pretty simple. So yeah, it's there's no reason why the council couldn't be just a little entrepreneurial 3 years on from receiving the regional forum report and try something that might shift the dial in terms of our water quality that doesn't rely on regulatory limit setting to do so.
So you're comfortable that, like, I'm just asking, this isn't, we changed the terms of reference from the committee. You go down here and all of a sudden I've got a $10 million bill to do what we're, financially. Oh, no, I'm just saying a budget, just in regards to one of those terms of reference. I mean, I'm just trying to scope it out. I mean, it's whether it's now to be scoped out, but I'm just trying to understand. We change stuff and do we know the complications by, with implications? of
Unintended
changing?
consequences.
That's the word.
We need to go through the annual plan process.
Yeah.
And or to look at what's the appropriate work program for.
So there's no, is there any danger? Has anybody got any questions in regards to changing the committee to an ICM with a change in terms of reference?
Yes,
And
because I think there's a way to embed ICMs.
The danger is we get it wrong, but we can fix it.
Well, but can we? I'm just trying to work out what does it mean. I mean, we're all sitting here and we got.
We suggested a 12-month review.
Yeah.
I wonder if that is the way through, because it strikes me that we're talking about two things here. One is actually work programs and the actual mahi itself. And the other thing is, what does the committee structure and the governance structure need to look like to sit over that? And to the point that Phil just made, so acknowledging the conversation around the table, is this a piece of work, given that there is a work program aspect to this and a governance consideration, that we go away and do and progress over the next year and make some sort of commitment at a 12-month point. We can toss around what that is, to review or maybe look to change the committee structure or integrate, improve, incorporate integrated catchment management committee 1 year also down the line.
So do I have a point?
Yeah. Can I just say, just take that, the last committee while we're talking about ICM, and I'm taking it's around the regional services discussion, yeah? Is everybody else comfortable with the other structures? The other committee structures? Within, you know, there's things we can add and there's, so I'm just saying, clear that, put it over there.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a major.
Yes, it is a major.
And I'm trying to work out how do we make that in 10 minutes. We've got 2 weeks. Do we need to get this done by the 20th of November when we sign up with the meetings? That's what I'm trying to.
So one
probably an indication we're getting.
So one option is that for the report that comes to the committee meeting, you have 2 options. Status quo with tweaks, perhaps the climate change subcommittee folded into strategy and policy. Status quo is option 1. Status quo is option 2, which is regional services, terms of reference and renamed to integrated catchment management. We can read the report that's available to us ahead of the meeting, and on the day we could vote on it. That's one option I'm proposing. And so the agenda report would outline the benefits and the disadvantages of those 2 options.
And we can have a debate on about it.
Yep.
So the report will have, is that timelines? Is that achievable? Make sure we've got all the terms of reference.
No, we've got the existing terms of references for the committees anyway. My suggestion would be in terms of, you know, what we would do as staff going away from here, those staff members that are responsible for the individual committees might have a look at those terms of references, noting that one of the things that I would be probably suggesting when you get into those first committees for the year, you just sort of have a look and review those and make sure that they're, you know, we have got it nailed down tightly and appropriately. I mean, one of the big conversations that I'm thinking that we need to capture is around how do we articulate and think about reporting on, and where do we put it in terms of reference, organisational performance. You know, it's been quite a conversation around the table, so let's make sure that we've got that clearly articulated in the terms of reference.
Sorry. Yeah, Amy, I think we need to understand what we're trying to capture, because, you know, Alistair's sort of alluding to some of the work programs, and from my understanding, there's a business case put before those work programs are initiated. And so that gives you a point of actually performance that you're measuring as you go through the process anyway. So that's from a business case perspective. I think we need to define what we're trying to actually identify around performance before we actually do a whole lot of work, to be fair.
Yeah, look, we introduced last year to the Finance and Performance Committee, we introduced business plan reporting. So we've got, you know, 55 key big programs of work, and we're reporting through on that. That's, you know, that reporting came in response to, you know, request and demand from people around this table. If we need to evolve that reporting to better meet your needs, then let's have that conversation, and that can be an evolutionary matter. But that's, you know, again, that's about the nature of the reporting as opposed to the committees themselves, and also acknowledging that we have other targets that are articulated through the long-term plan that we do report against as well. But yeah, your point's very well made.
Yeah. So everybody's comfortable maybe what Phil's just indicated, having two. Yes.
Yeah.
And if we get the report, so we've got plenty of time to read it,
Yep.
soak it up, and before we come to the committee.
Yep, I'll meeting Phil for his homework. Yep,
Yes.
but you know, acknowledging that those are draft as well, and that you have an opportunity through that discussion to comment on the terms of reference as well. Okay.
Well,
And I'm just sending you what I.
Yeah.
Right now.
So anyway, start, you know, what we've recommended there anyway. So is there any other question? Well, the sizes, just in regards to, we've got full committee, you know, we've had full council committees. Now, I'm pretty relaxed about this in regards to, I said, I generally, personally, myself, it's just, you know, everybody's got their interests. We want to make sure everybody's doing the work too. Everybody's got to roll their sleeves up, and nobody wants to carry any other person. So, but I don't know whether necessary for a full council committees. I'm just putting it out there, but I'm happy to hear. I know we had the S&P one there, but I just want to know everybody's thoughts.
You're doing that committees of full.
Yeah, full council committees, just to clarify that. Are we happy or not? You know, I don't know, Lyndall's we got something to say? No, you're looking at me that look.
Yes.
You want to talk?
I wouldn't
Tell
want
her
any
then.
more
No.
full committee. This might sound lazy, but it is. That all of us rural type councillors need to be on the rural services committee, because all that information and the thoughts and everything, we've got to get it back out into our community, because that's what they're asking. And Phil, in his model that he put up, there's a whole lot more people involved there, feeding information in and feeding information out, which makes it very attractive to the rural community or ratepayers. Maybe, I don't know what happens in town, but probably Mr. Roy every night goes out and tells everybody about it. But outside in the morning, okay. But yeah, we could, yeah, I don't know. I just get all upset about information not getting out and not getting in.
Within, like council back out to the coming out of the same
Yeah.
same you've been indicating. You yet, or Roger?
Roger, no, we go, Roger.
I'll write a short one. It was just reflecting on the comment around 12-month reviews, and I just wanted to clarify whether it has to be 12 months or whether it can be at any point in time, and that therefore, thank you. So that therefore gives us the ability to stand up, subcommittees or portfolios in a much more responsive way to changing demands, which we know are coming. And so I'd certainly be very supportive of that as a more reactive way of working. Focus on particular issues as they arise. Once they're dealt with, they're closed off, and we're back to our structure.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Any other comments? Okay, Lyndall.
Thanks. A couple of things. I go back to my comment about trust and how big the committees may or may not need to be. And remind us all that we're making decisions for the whole region, not just for our particular constituents. But also, to your point, Jeremy, what might be of greater importance is whether the committees have delegated authority or not. Because that changes the way the council discusses as a whole the recommendations that come to it, because they won't be recommendations, they'll be decisions. So I think, regardless of how big the committees are, what we need to consider is whether we're going to delegate responsibility to any or none of the councils. None is the current protocol, and I don't have a problem with that because I think it gives us a couple of bites at the cherry if we need it. But just wanted to say that actually that's probably of greater importance.
I think, I'm just thinking the last 9 years I've been here, I don't think we ever changed the committees.
Yeah, a little bit. Terms of reference have changed a little bit.
Created an
Yeah, just saying.
committee.
Hey?
We created.
Oh, no, I'm just talking about actually decisions, recommendations.
Yeah, well, sometimes we tweak the recommendations, which is great.
The work's being done at the committee.
Oh, yeah, no, there've been amendments.
Yeah.
Amendments.
Not huge amounts
I've
anyway.
been
No.
involved.
We haven't negated
But,
it.
you
Haven't negated, but we're tidying it up.
Reading the information, most of these committees have a quorum recommended or that's already in place. And there's a couple of them that are full council, and then the rest are
One.
strategy SP will change since the last 3 years.
So I suppose the decision or the discussion is, are we comfortable with what's already in place, or do we want to make some changes around?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm sort of asking in regards to that. Committee sizes. I'm a bit more flexible than council.
Yes, and
So that's what I'd like to know.
I want to agree with Lyndall. I think that it's good. It's a good process to have a recommendation and then a second bite from those that were there, in case there was something missed. And I'm not keen to keep it the way it is.
I've just had the idea, like we had a full council committee. We can still, anybody can come to the committees and discuss, they just don't have those votes. So whether there's 7 in a committee, you still have 12 there, there'll be still a pretty good feeling that you'll get a democratic decision. So I'm just saying it's whether compulsory that they're the council committee meetings.
And
Teams.
just thinking about the problem that you're trying to solve, right? It's often about information asymmetry. We've introduced that previously, and how can you make the knowledge around the decisions and the information around the decisions or the recommendations that you're making, how do you convey that back to full council? So, is it just a committee thing where you've all got to be there to have the discussion in the room, or do we adopt practices that when you are talking about the minutes at the council meeting where you're adopting resolutions, the chairs take more time to give a brief synopsis of the conversation that was had. Also, always open, you can get the agendas if you want to go and have a look at the background, material. You can talk to your colleagues. There's a number of ways that you can, solve that particular issue that you might be facing.
Yeah, I just want to add to that that also helps us cover ourselves if we're absent, because we all have things that take us, away. And so having some of that go on as well, and also the the second coverage at council means that if you missed the original conversation for whatever reason, you know, a legit apology, or you just didn't go to the extra committee, you've got a more thorough briefing. And it's also up to us to make sure we go back and look at anything that you were particularly interested in that we missed.
So it's the S&P we're talking about if we carried on the same.
Yep.
What do people want to do with that? Is it full, at the moment, status quo, it's a full council committee. Is it the same as, do we want that in the next term?
If it has an ICN element embedded in it.
I think the ICM may become more of a full council. I think it's going to be.
If we stick with the name, strategy and policy, and if we reserve the freedom and flexibility to, as a council, designate actually this as a strategic issue that requires our attention because it's important, whether it's driven by RMA reform, amalgamation at the Southland level of local government, a pandemic, or the arrival of an alien spaceship over Te Anau. Whatever it is that becomes strategic to us, we can say that's appropriate to go on the agenda of the S&P committee. And it gives us an alternate way of getting all of the councillors in a room before it's in front of council. So I sense that maybe it is appropriate to leave it as a committee of the whole. If you wanted to weave ICM into it, I just wouldn't note there are 12 reporting catchments, 12 councillors. If you all sponsor a catchment, I would vote for Waikiwi for myself. Smallest and easiest one.
You have to declare an interest there.
Right.
So are people comfortable with that? We do leave that. There is that. When we need, we can bring everybody in.
So the direction I've got for the council paper is that status quo, exactly as is, might make some tweaks to the terms of reference based on the conversations today, noting that there'll be opportunities in your committees to further tweak. And then option 2 is to look at what regional services would be if we morphed it into an ICM committee. Yeah, all good?
Okay.
Fantastic. Right, before I leave, I want to hand over to Paula because I just want to touch really briefly, well, I'm not going to touch on it, I was going to touch on it really briefly, the implications of committee structures on remuneration.
So I have 4 slides that are going to take me 2 minutes to do so that you can all go and before you get into your next briefing. How's that? Right. Effectively, with regards to remuneration, this is done by an independent authority, so called the Remuneration Authority. They set the pay, the allowances and the expenses for the elected members under the Local Government Act. Council receives the remuneration pool and it's based on size, it's not based on the number of councillors on the council. And the actual pool itself actually excludes the chair's salary. So the rest of the council actually is funded by the pool separate to the chair's remuneration. So a determination was made just before the election, and that is actually detailed in what they call Schedule 3, which details the pool for remuneration. If we don't, which we haven't decided on our committees right now, the target for the Remuneration Authority was the 14th of November to get back to them the information around what we were doing with the structure of our committees. So therefore, until we've actually submitted what our governance structure will be, they won't be able to determine what the pool is, and you'll be back paid once we've actually submitted that to them. Now for us, because we've missed the deadline for the 14th of November, that won't be till February, March next year. So until that time, except for the chair, you'll be sitting at the base allowance for councillors.
Of course, you get that.
Not many Christmas presents this year.
So there are some payments of allowances that we actually have. There's the vehicle, travel time and ICT and childcare allowance. And there is also a new home security system allowance. The council itself hasn't decided what we are going to do with regards to the home security system allowance, and we will have to bring a report to you on that at some point, which may be actually when we actually
bring the committees to you. So on the 10th, we could probably look at that, or we could do it later, knowing that we don't have to submit until later in early next year. And the final slide effectively just shows you what the current pool is. So you can see that. If you do have further questions around the REM authority or anything that's actually in the schedule, by all means, just actually contact me or the governance team and we can ask questions. Here we go. Was that 3 minutes or 2 minutes?
Even less. Any questions? That's where the time goes. Any questions from anybody? No? Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you. We have a briefing.
Yes, if you want a quick cup of tea.
Grab a quick
Yep.
cup or whatever.
How long are we allowed, Chairman?